Hey, good afternoon, Keith. How are you doing?
Hey, good, Justin. How are you?
Great that you can take a few minutes to talk to me about what it means to be a product manager. Is it okay if we just jump right in?
Let's do it.
All right. So, I think just sort of a context and background question is how did you get into product management? What got you into the business?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because I know it's one of those weird career paths that doesn't seem to have a natural intake. Um, so my background is primarily, well, way back, my degree's in human factors engineering. So obviously, in the early parts of my career, spending a lot of time working in software interfaces and in usability testing, and so became familiar with a lot of the underpinnings of sort of what makes for a good product. But the majority of my background has been in consulting and in software development happening, for example, inside an enterprise and not strictly sort of treated as product. And in part, that was because product is a much more prevalent thing now than it was. Of course, I'm going to be dating myself a little. And so I think, I probably was doing a lot of product things. It just wasn't called that. But then as the career path began to emerge and I saw it align with my interests and skills, I actually made a career shift away from, at the time I was running a professional services group for a software company and went directly into product and sort of took an interesting step sort of sideways down in order to get access to sort of that opportunity. And then from there, spent many years sort of learning the tricks of the trade and growing within that organization. And then since sort of moving on and providing that capability and capacity for a lot of other companies.
All right. Awesome. Okay, so first question is what should someone new to product focus on learning first and then doing well?
Well, one of the things about product, and I'm sure you and others have sort of heard and or experienced this, is that every organization sort of thinks of product management as something a little bit different. And that's mostly good because obviously they can deploy it to meet their needs, but it also permits people who have different capabilities to thrive in different work settings and different sort of product maturity settings and different ecosystems, say like B2B versus B2C and so on. So I think it's a little bit tough to answer, but I will say sort of understanding what that spectrum of capabilities might be, and then understanding sort of where you individually are strong is a really good thing. And then understanding sort of how to find organizations that align with those strengths, how to double down on your strengths, and maybe in some cases how to sort of round out or shore up some of the places that are going to be required that aren't. So it's sort of I answered the question by not answering it. Because I think there's just so many places. I will say that there maybe in an attempt to try to answer your question a little bit more directly, there's some things with product management that are a little bit counterintuitive. I think a lot of people come into it assuming it's kind of like project or program management. And I would sort of fiercely argue that it's not. There's actually very few aspects of that. But some of the things people don't, I think, fully appreciate is, for example, how much a product manager's job tends to be around stakeholder management. And by that, I mean sort of working with lots of important people who have different agendas and priorities and trying to figure out how to sort of navigate that space politically, diplomatically, and with sort of good listening ears and a keen understanding of how to make people happy. I sometimes joke that product managers are the one person at a company uniquely suited to make everybody unhappy. So trying to navigate that space is hard, and sometimes people don't anticipate that that's such an important part of the job. So skill up, that would be a place I would definitely suggest that people do.
Okay, great. All right, so next question. How would you suggest a product manager continue to educate themselves? And for the sake of this, we'll say it's just someone who's whatever your typical understanding of product management is, given that you mentioned in the previous question, there's a spectrum.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a firm believer in learning by doing. So, I mean, this is this is might be a little bit of a contrarian answer, because I think some of what I'm guessing you're interested in is sort of what resources might be available, or what have other people done around that in the way of, maybe going outside and seeking that information. I think that much of the learning around product management, at least my learning, has been sort of on the job, and I think that instead of brushing it off, the question off, I actually think that's hard to do. I think we get caught up in sort of delivering on the product and pulling people together and making sure we're hitting roadmaps and dates and managing the chaos, that we forget that this is an amazing opportunity for us to refine our craft and our capabilities. And one of the ways that I've seen that happen successfully is in agile software development and Scrum in particular. There's an exercise called a retrospective, where the team gets together and regularly, people of course may be familiar with this, and regularly get together and reflect on what just happened, with the commitment that the team owns the process and owns their productivity, owns their own improvement, so they can and should be responsible for objectively evaluating how it went and what they might do to improve. So, obviously that's an idea sort of straight from lean manufacturing and being able to deploy Kaizens. And I think that attitude sort of, if you do it a bunch as a product person, and you should do it as a bunch as a product person, will grow on you, and you begin to see like, wow, this applies to not just my team, but it applies to the product itself, and it applies to the organization, and perhaps most importantly, it applies to me as a person. I should be continuously observing my own performance and coming up with ways to experiment and improve and objectively evaluate and learn. And I think that's hard to do. And I think by default, most of us don't do this. I know I certainly don't I wouldn't, for example, choose to watch this video after it's done, not because it's not so well produced, but because I don't want to watch myself on a video camera. And I think others would probably agree with me. But that's sort of the analogy for maybe the best way to learn, is to watch ourselves and pay attention to how we're doing and how effective we are.
Okay. I love the honesty and the candor. So the next question is, how do you see the product manager role changing in the next few years? And we can say either in the entrepreneurial sense, if you're at a firm that's just 10 people or smaller and you just got your round A funding, or you're at a mature company, or you set the stage, whatever you feel is appropriate. But it'd be really good to get your sense of how you see the role changing in any one of at least one, if not two, environments.
Yeah, well, I mean, for starters, I think corporations are becoming a lot more like startups, or certainly with their new product development efforts. But I'll set that aside for a moment. I think the one way that it's sort of one trend line that I think is worth pointing out is that to some extent the world is becoming productized, and things like product thinking as a thing in and of itself is starting to enter into our dialogue, both as product people, but probably more importantly, not as product people. So, as executives who aren't traditionally necessarily in product, become more familiar with things like lean startup, obviously, design thinking, and agile, to name three. I think people will begin to recognize that activities they did in the past would probably, and are looking to do in the future, would benefit tremendously from these ways of thinking and these specific methods. And so what's happening is that the business environments are shifting. When you're in a startup world, you're shifting because you're starting, right? You're like, all right, we're going to create this new company, we're going to create this way of working, and let's look around and see what options we have and what tools are available, because we want to kick butt. And so you're going to pick sort of some of these tools that I just mentioned, both as methods, but then also a lot of the sort of software, a lot of the people and practices that have all started to build up, and experiences that have all started to build up around these. That's what you're going to choose. Now, as a larger organization, I think you're in a kind of a different place. Traditionally, you may have deployed some of these things, or you may have deployed none. You may have deployed some in some departments, but not others. And so I think there's going to just be increasing embracing of these things, so that the environment of how product management is going to shift is that I don't want to say everything's going to become product management. That would be, I think, way too sweeping and hyperbolic. But I think I'm seeing that people are having a new and growing understanding of how to think about what we do. Like, just one example, like just talking to agencies. There used to be sort of, especially interactive agencies, there used to be this notion that you would get hired for campaigns or for website redesigns. And I'm not saying those things don't exist anymore, but savvy companies are thinking about those digital efforts as having, aren't as like a brochure or a signpost, on the interwebs. They're thinking a lot more as a core piece of value delivery for their customers. And when you think about it that way, I mean, that's probably pretty obvious, but when you think about it that way, you start thinking, well, actually my website's a product. And hey, guess what? In many ways, the way that we're organized to get stuff done and solve problems in our organization would really benefit from product thinking. So I think the big way it's going to change is that product people are going to become, there's going to be more of them. They're going to become increasingly like evangelists. And product people are going to be responsible for helping themselves and their teams and all the people they touch in an organization understand how to think better, how to think differently, and how to stay on top of the science, if you will, that is sort of flying at a rapid pace. Even things like lean startup are so different now than they were 3 or 4 years ago when Eric, although it's probably more than that, but at this point it's probably like 7 years ago. Wow, since Eric published his book. And it's I think all those things are just going to keep speeding up.
Okay. You touched on this a little earlier. How do you feel product managers know they're doing well?
Yeah.
Would it be retrospectives again still, or?
I think retros are a great way to figure out if the team is doing well. I think product managers have a role on a team, and an important one. And I think in a retro, if the team is lacking the things that they need from a product manager, that those things will come out, and that's a great place to learn, and it's a great sounding board. And I do think the team can provide a certain amount of a litmus test, but I don't think a product manager sort of owns the team, and those people don't report to them if they're doing it right. So I think there are other measures. I would be remiss to not mention probably the most obvious measure, which is product outcomes. I think that at the end of the day, the product manager hopefully has ownership and responsibility around that and is driving their priority decisions and other things that they may be responsible for, like staffing and direction and decisions within products like feature sets and things. And they're driving all that based on outcomes they're trying to realize. So if they don't have identified outcomes, that's right off the bat, they have room for improvement. But having objectives and key results tied to their product and monitoring their performance against that, I think is pretty critical. I would also argue back to the stakeholder aspect. I jokingly said they can make everybody unhappy, but the reality is, being able to manage that team of people in such a way that they feel heard and their expertise is tapped, and their needs are at least addressed, if not met. And by that I mean, there are ways to help our peers and stakeholders without necessarily delivering very specific features they request. And I think that those all sort of fall into the purview. And to my point around things moving quickly, I think another way to measure ourselves is how are we doing against the science? Are we furthering it? Are we catching up? And sort of my latest measurement for myself, especially in the work that I do, which is to help companies do product development and product strategy, is how is the organization embracing this stuff? I mean, if you talk to any product manager that's been at it for even a little while, and you ask them to give you some of the challenges that they have in their job, I would be shocked if most, if not all of them, talked about the challenges in helping the organization understand and embrace what it is they're trying to do, and how it may be a little bit different than the way that the organization looks at how it manages its HR department or or how it does, well, pretty much anything other than customer-facing, forward-looking product development. So another measure would be just, are you affecting change of the organization? Are you winning hearts and minds? Are you, because it's one thing to like kick butt on a product, but if you're doing it with some secret sauce that nobody knows about, then, goodness knows if the wind shifts direction, then you're high and dry. I think helping an organization come along with you ensures future success as new products are conceived, as products go through their life cycles. And it's critical that it's almost like your job is to convince the rest of the organization to think more like you do. I know that sounds super arrogant, but I don't mean that, your specific product instincts or your specific product feature ideas. I think more like you, meaning like pay attention and understand and learn from customers and learn how to move quickly and be responsive to market shifts and, learn how to bring teams, disparate, cross-functional, small teams together to solve complex problems. I mean, I would argue that product management is kind of like the tip of the spear, but the whole rest of the organization is sort of rushing in behind them and will have to perform in the same way and against the same metrics across their organization, whether you're in customer service or HR.
So in closing, are there any helpful hints, tidbits that you think product managers should be made aware of?
Keep an open mind about what the product may be, where it may go, who may help it get there, and how you may go about doing it. Because I think we simultaneously need to cherish and encourage the things that we do well and that we've already figured out. We also need to remember that we don't always have it right, and our intuitions about the best product features, whatever, are frequently proven wrong by our customers. So I think some of the best product managers I've met are ones that have strong bench skills and strong intuition, but are also shockingly open when you interact with them about what they're doing, and the openness around what they might be not doing correctly. So I think that's sort of counterintuitive and it's hard to do. So my one tidbit would be to practice that. Watch videos of yourself, kind of in the grand scheme of things.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time this afternoon, and be well.
Cool. Thanks, Justin. You too.